How's it going? Dave from Comic Book Investments. So in this video, we're going to look at 5 keys that are heating up. They're going up in price. Some of these breaking all-time records, some just going up for the meantime. Who's to say? I'll dive more into the numbers and we'll talk about each one. But one of them's gone up by like 225% or something like that. So quite a bit. A lot, actually. Very much so. And it's not just like it went from like $5 to like $10, $15. It went up thousands of dollars. All right, so let's take a look at these. The first one on the list is G.I. Joe, a Real American Hero, number 21. An 8.0 is up 54% from 123, now averaging 190, and that was back in November. And a 9.2 recently is up 10% from 227 to 250, and a 9.4 is up 56% from 224 last selling in October, now selling for 350 on average. Now you can see that graph. You can see it's kind of going along, it shoots way up and just go way back down. And then recently it drops off and it's slowly going up again. If you look at where it was just a few months ago, back in like November or December area, you're looking at where it was probably, if I could zoom in here, probably around 2019 numbers. And recently it's gone up a little bit. Now, does that mean that it's going to continue going up? Probably not. It's probably just a little boost here. You know, I don't see it really going back to where it was at its all-time highs, which is, lots and lots of money. But at least I think we're seeing close to the bottom. I mean, like I said, it's back to 2019 numbers. That's where it is, around there. So I feel like we're getting close to the bottom of that. Now, most books, you can't expect massive jumps like that. If you look at the graph, like it's literally just goes along like this, slowly at an increase, and then had a huge spike up. You can't expect that to happen over and over and over again. So, but what you can expect is like, 10, 15% gain on average. If it's the right book, it's the right key and you get it at the right time at the right price, something like that for this book. But don't expect it to jump up all of a sudden 3x in the next year. Next, we got Thor 617. This is the Tron variant. A 9.4 is up 145%, but it just went from $20 to $49. It's really nothing. A 9.6 is up 11% from $90 back in 2021, now selling for $100. And a 9.8 is up 77% from selling $225 back in 2022, now one sold for $400. There's this. When you have a book like this, a modern book like this, you get a 9.4, 9.2, or 9.0 or anything like that. It's case cost at that point. You get one that's cheap that goes in auction, sells for $20, then you get one that's buy it now and someone buys it for $49, which is basically case cost for shipping it there, insurance, shipping it back, getting it cased, and all that kind of stuff. Even if you look at the 9.6. There's not that many sales of this because most modern books, they're all just going to be mostly 9.8. So it's almost pointless to get a 9.6 unless it's like some super key that happens to be modern, which this is not. So, getting a 9.6 in, almost 2 years ago is $90. Now she's up to $100. It's going to probably stay around that price near forever. You want to get the 9.8s, but even the 9.8s, they're just wildly unpredictable with these things. So it's up to $400 now, but it was up to $600 not too long ago, and it's just going to be like that all over again. There's a lot of these books and a lot of these variants, there's just not enough demand to meet the supply that's out there. And then once anything gets expensive, everyone will know about it, and they start selling their books that they have because they bought it at a cover price or next to cover price, and then it floods the market and it drops it way back down again, and then people realize, oh, okay, it's not as rare as I thought. Next, we got SpiderMan number 1. This is the golden record reprint. A 9.0 is up 225% from last year selling for $1,600, now selling for $5,200. Seems insane. A 9.4 is up 45% from $1,680 back in 2021, now selling for $2,430. And then a 9.8 sold recently for $5,425, and last year sold for $5,100, and that's up 6%. Yeah, that $5,200, I really don't understand. For a 9.0, that's basically a 9.8 price. And yeah, that was way too high. But nonetheless, they are going up. The reason why books like this go up is because people just can't afford a Spider-Man #1. So you get the Golden Record reprint. And if you don't know what a Golden Record reprint is, you would get this record, and it would come with a comic book. And this came out in 1966, so a few years after the original Spider-Man one. And then you could put the record on, and you can listen to the story and read the comic. Now, this only had one story in it. Sometimes back then they would have two stories. This would only have one of the stories. So I still think it's a good book because it's an old reprint. This is not reprinted in like the 90s or the 2000s or the 80s even. This is reprinted like a few years after. So it's almost just as old as the book it's reprinting. Because you have to remember, back then, there was no internet. If you want to know what happened to Spider-Man 1, you either had to know someone or get the reprint. And reprints weren't all that common back then. So there wasn't really, a lot of times they reprint them in like Marvel Tales or things like that. Or sometimes even in annuals, they would reprint certain stories. But there's really no way to get a hold of this. And there wasn't things like, there were some kind of places that had back issue stuff where you could like, you know, they would have like a list and you could send away and get a comic book, but they were not common, hard to find. Comic conventions didn't really exist. Price guides didn't really exist. All that kind of stuff. Next, we got Star Wars #2. This is the 35-cent variant. A 6.5 is up 131% from 1,300 last year, or actually in 2021. Now it's selling for $3,000. A 7.0 sold for $1,275 in 2022. Now it's selling for $1,700. That's up 33%. And then back in 2021, an 8.5 sold for $1,750, and one recently sold for $3,500. That is up 100%. That most recent one was in this month. So yeah. Sold for an 8.5, sold for $3,500 in January, so this month. But the last one sold back in 2021, so up 100% of a jump. I remember I had a couple of these and I could not get rid of them. I had two 35-cent variants. Now they're doing pretty well. I think people are realizing they are pretty rare. The reason why they have a 35-cent variant is because Marvel was kind of skeptical if they could raise their prices. So what they did is they would have different sectors that the distributors would go to. And so one of their distributors, which handled like 4 areas, they raised the price just on that area. So they are extremely rare. Some are more desired than others, like Star Wars, Iron Fist, even Spider-Man, things like that. They're much more desired. So that's why they're very expensive. All right, last we got Wizard #1, a 9.2, and this is the newsstand. I'm doing a newsstand, even though I have the collector's edition down there. It's actually the newsstand. A 9.2, none has really sold except one recently sold for $1,000. A 9.4 is up 114%. And in 2021, a newsstand sold for $515. Now one sold for $1,100. And then a 9.8, this is a crazy, crazy number. That's why I had to put it on here. $18,502 for a 9.8 newsstand. That is insane. Almost 20 grand for a 9.8 newsstand. #1. So this was a Wizards magazine. It had even had like a price guide, and it'd come out monthly. A lot of people would look at it and go like, oh, this. I remember looking at it. It's like, oh, this book jumped up. Because normally you had the Overstreet price guide, and that would come out yearly. But what if you wanted to know what was hot and going on all the time? So they would have this. How they came up with these numbers, I don't know. There was no internet back then, so they just kind of made them up, I guess. And they also had like articles, things going on. It was a very popular magazine that they came out with. This cover was done by Todd McFarlane, but they have a couple different variants of this. They have the normal edition, the collector's edition, San Diego edition, and then they have the newsstand edition. So I personally have one newsstand edition. I take that back. I have 2 newsstand editions. And I have like 2 regular editions. I sent my nicest copy away to get graded, and I think it could come back a 9.8. But here's the thing: it's not going to sell for 20 grand. Once this happened, and this one sold for 20 grand, Now everyone's going to go looking through their boxes and trying to see what they have, because this was a popular magazine, so it wasn't like they only made like 1,000 copies of this. So they're going to be looking through the boxes and they're going to be sending them out, and there's going to be more 9/8s coming back, which will drop the price, every single time that happens. Most people spend a lot of money when they think it's the only one or super rare, but then once more and more come out, like, for example, in Action Comics #1, you have like, I don't know, a 3.0, you're going to probably get a couple million for it. If all of a sudden someone found a distributor box somehow and there was like 500 Action Comics #1, 1,000 new Action Comic #1s, untouched, ranging in grades all the way from like 9/8s all the way down to like 1.0s, that would drop the price of every Action 1, because it would flood the market with way more. So it's supply and demand. Not saying there's not a lot of demand for an Action Comics #1. It's just that when you flood the market with a ton of supply, that demand spreads out, because why pay $3 million for this one when there's like 10 more on eBay in auction right now, and I could probably get one better price. So I have a feeling that's just a crazy price, almost 20 grand for a Wizards #1. I mean, let me know, did you guys ever have a Wizards magazine out there? But it won't stay. It will go down. So the person that paid the 20 grand, this happens, this happened a lot back in the day. It's happening with video games. When CGC first came out and they would tout like, oh my gosh, you have a SpiderMan 26 and a 9.4. It's the highest grade, not higher. And then they would try to convince you, these auction houses like Heritage, and convince you like, oh, they're so rare. Like, how often have you ever seen? Because the internet's not really a thing. Oh, I mean, it existed, but it wasn't a big deal. And it's like, oh, I guess it is the highest grade, and there's going to be none that beat it. So you pay like a ridiculous price for Spider-Man 26 and a 9.4, and you're like, okay, I'll pay like 20 grand for it. And then all of a sudden another 9.4 comes out. Oh, okay, well, that's not bad. And then all of a sudden a 9.6 comes out. Oh, it's just one higher grade. And all of a sudden your price goes down and down and down and down. Same things are happening with video games right now. People are buying like, oh, Super Mario Brothers 64 for $1.5 million. And it's a 9.8. It'll be the only one. This is the lie that they tell you. Video games were meant to be played. So everyone opened them, and they, it's the same like you say with comic books. Well, comic books are meant to be read, so every kid read them, which would ruin them. So don't listen to that kind of stuff. Now, more and more video games, all of a sudden, everyone that goes, hey, I have that video game, and I never played it, and it's sealed. Let me go and get it graded. Now it gets flooded, and, Wata was in bed with Heritage, and so they'd purposely slow down the grading of games, and they wouldn't release their population reports so they could get more money for their video games. You see how all that works? Once you have a lot of money, it's easier to make more money because you just bend the rules in your favor. On that note, have a good weekend. And go Dolphins.